In the tempest of life, where tumultuous waves crash against the vessel of our existence, we are often left adrift, vulnerable to the caprices of fate. It is in these moments of turmoil that the true measure of a person is revealed. Stoicism, an ancient philosophy forged in the crucible of adversity, offers us a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. It beckons us to embrace the virtues of self-control and fortitude, guiding us through the storm with unwavering resolve. The Stoics understood that crises are an inevitable aspect of human existence. From the trials of Socrates to the exile of Seneca, history is replete with examples of individuals who faced adversity with stoic grace. These luminaries serve as beacons of inspiration, illuminating the path for us to follow. Central to the Stoic approach to crisis management is the concept of mastering the soul. As Epictetus famously proclaimed, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. In the face of adversity, we possess the power to choose our response. This power, known as prohairesis, is the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy. By exercising control over our thoughts and actions, we can transcend the limitations imposed upon us by external circumstances. Consider the story of Marcus Aurelius, the revered Stoic emperor of Rome. Amidst the chaos of war and political intrigue, he maintained an inner tranquility that remained unshaken. In his seminal work, Meditations, he reflects on the fleeting nature of life and the importance of living in accordance with reason. Despite the immense pressures of his station, Marcus Aurelius remained steadfast in his commitment to virtue, serving as a paragon of Stoic resilience. The Stoic sage does not seek to escape from adversity but embraces it as an opportunity for growth. As Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. In the crucible of adversity, we discover the true depths of our character, forging our virtues through the fires of tribulation. It is through adversity that we are transformed, emerging stronger and more resilient than before. At the heart of Stoic crisis management lies the practice of negative visualization. By contemplating the worst-case scenarios, we inoculate ourselves against the fear of uncertainty. As Seneca advises, set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" By confronting our fears head-on, we rob them of their power over us, liberating ourselves from the shackles of anxiety. Furthermore, the Stoics emphasize the importance of maintaining a sense of perspective amidst adversity. In the grand tapestry of the cosmos, our individual struggles pale in comparison to the vastness of eternity. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. By cultivating a cosmic perspective, we transcend the petty concerns of the ego, embracing our place within the larger scheme of existence. Crises are not merely external events but opportunities for spiritual growth and self-discovery. In the words of Epictetus, do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. By aligning ourselves with the natural order of the universe, we find peace amidst the chaos, serenity amidst the storm. In conclusion, Stoic crisis management offers us a transformative path through the trials and tribulations of life. By mastering our thoughts and actions, we transcend the limitations imposed upon us by external circumstances. Through adversity, we discover the true depths of our character, emerging stronger and more resilient than before. Let us heed the wisdom of the Stoics and embrace the challenges that lie before us, for it is through struggle that we find meaning and purpose in life. Stoicism stands as a beacon of strength and resilience. Drawing from the wisdom of ancient philosophers and the enduring tales of history, we embark on a journey to explore the profound strategies of Stoic crisis management, guiding us towards the shores of tranquility and inner fortitude. 1. Embrace the immutable nature of the universe. At the heart of Stoicism lies the recognition of the immutable nature of the universe. Just as the tides ebb and flow with unwavering consistency, so too do the events of our lives unfold according to the grand design of fate. Embracing this cosmic order grants us a sense of perspective, allowing us to navigate crises with a calm resolve. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once remarked, "Some things are in our control and others not." In times of crisis, we must focus our energies on that which lies within our sphere of influence, relinquishing futile attempts to control the whims of fate. By accepting the transience of external circumstances, we free ourselves from the shackles of anxiety and despair, finding solace in the immutable laws of the cosmos. 2. Cultivate inner resilience through virtue. Central to the Stoic ethos is the cultivation of inner resilience through the practice of virtue. Drawing inspiration from the lives of sages such as Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, we learn to temper our souls amidst the flames of adversity, emerging stronger and more virtuous than before. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, extolled the virtues of fortitude and self-mastery, declaring, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." In the crucible of crisis, we are afforded the opportunity to test our mettle, to forge our character in the fires of adversity. By embodying the cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, we transcend the ephemeral trials of the world, finding refuge in the sanctuary of our own virtues. 3. Practice the art of negative visualization. In the face of uncertainty and upheaval, the Stoic sage employs the art of negative visualization as a potent tool for resilience. By contemplating the worst-case scenarios with a sober mind, we inoculate ourselves against the paralyzing grip of fear, preparing ourselves to confront adversity with clarity and composure. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus admonished his students to prepare for each task as though mortal. In envisioning the vicissitudes of fate, we fortify our spirits against the onslaught of despair, cultivating a sense of equanimity in the face of life's trials. By embracing the inevitability of adversity, we strip it of its power over our hearts and minds, emerging unscathed amidst the tumultuous seas of fate. 4. Transmute adversity into opportunity. In the crucible of crisis, the Stoic adept discerns the hidden opportunities concealed amidst the wreckage of misfortune. Drawing inspiration from the life of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, we learn to transmute adversity into a catalyst for personal growth and transformation. Marcus Aurelius, in his seminal work Meditations, reflected, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, we harness the power of our indomitable will to chart a course through the stormy seas of adversity. Every setback becomes a stepping stone, every trial a testament to our resilience and resolve. In the crucible of crisis, we discover the latent potential within ourselves, emerging from the ashes of adversity reborn and revitalized. 5. Embrace the Stoic community. In times of crisis, the Stoic adept finds solace and strength in the embrace of the Stoic community. United by a shared commitment to virtue and resilience, we draw inspiration from one another's courage and fortitude, bolstering our spirits amidst the trials of life. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "We are waves of the same sea, leaves of the same tree, flowers of the same garden." In the fellowship of our fellow travelers on the Stoic path, we find communion amidst the chaos of the world, forging bonds of solidarity that transcend the boundaries of time and space. Through mutual support and encouragement, we navigate the turbulent waters of fate with grace and dignity, emerging unscathed amidst the tempests of life. In conclusion, Stoic crisis management offers us a guiding light amidst the darkness of adversity, empowering us to navigate life's trials with resilience and fortitude. By embracing the immutable nature of the universe, cultivating inner resilience through virtue, practicing the art of negative visualization, transmuting adversity into opportunity, and embracing the Stoic community, we chart a course towards inner peace and tranquility amidst the stormy seas of fate. As we embark on this journey together, let us draw inspiration from the wisdom of the ancients and the enduring tales of history, guiding us towards the shores of serenity and inner strength.